Saturday's news.
Hello and welcome to Old News, the programme and podcast which looks at news stories of the day through the papers of yesterday. Back to our normal format this week, and we're pleased to see the iMuseum page up and running again. A vast source, a wealth of information, particularly for programmes like this. And we're talking about the herring again. That's been back in the news. A herring quota back last year. It's being doubled, we're being told. 200 tonnes will be the quota for the island in the next season. Which made me start rummaging back again to look at herring quotas and herring fleets and the admiral of the herring fleet. And we'll start by having a ponder of the times of Saturday, June the 4th, 1892. A nobby in distress. A nobby, of course, being one of the old Manx sailing herring boats. You still see a few of them around in traditional boat weekends. Beautiful things they were. A sharp gale from the southeast was experienced at Peel on Wednesday night, the article says. The herring fleet, which were out and shot, I presume that means shot with their nets out, experienced heavy weather in making the port in the morning, the wind being then at its height. One nobby, the Foxhound, Patrick Gorry, the master, was fairly beaten, being totally unable to carry canvas, even an attempt to carry the second jib as a long sail being unsuccessful, and she was forced to come to an anchor about 2 miles off the head. On her position becoming known, the Nicky Ann Jane, John Hastings, the master, proceeded to her assistance and succeeded in bringing her into the harbour in tow. Considerable excitement was caused by the occurrence. I bet there was. We're also told in the same article the extension of Peel Breakwater. During the winter preparations for the extension of the Peel Breakwater have been made by the formation of the concrete blocks, 5,000 tonnes of which are now ready for use. On Wednesday, the setting of these blocks was commenced under the supervision of Mr. J. Walker, the engineer to the Harbour Board, and the first 2 foundation blocks were successfully lowered in their place. The work of setting the blocks will now be proceeded with as fast as they can be prepared. We skip forward to 1899 in the Ramsey Weekly News, long gone I think, Saturday, November the 4th of that year. A steam herring fleet. A new company called the Steam Herring Fleet Limited has been formed in Aberdeen with a capital of £100,000 of £1 each. The steam drifter will doubtless sooner or later supersede the present type quite to the same extent as steam trawlers have ousted other kinds of craft. The proposal is to have a fleet of 20 steamers at an average value of around £2,000 each for the purpose of working the round of the herring fishing seasons, beginning at Stornoway in the month of May and taking Shetland, Peterhead in the north of Scotland, Scarborough, Grimsby and the earlier English fishing grounds, and finish up Christmas at Yarmouth and Lowestoft. The rest of the year may be filled in at the mackerel or the cod and ling line fishing. The directors are so confident of success they have agreed to take no remuneration for their services until a dividend of at least 10% has been paid to the shareholders for 3 years. Doesn't sound a bad return, does it? Now that the ball has been set rolling with steam herring vessels, it's only a matter of time, says the Fish Trades Gazette, when they will be generally adopted. With proper crews, their success is almost a certainty. Their chief advantages, in the meantime, will be the certainty of reaching the fishing grounds in time to shoot their nets and in returning to the early markets, independent of calms or adverse winds. The catch that is in the market in time for early trades often commands double the ordinary market price, and the pioneers of the steam fishing will have pretty much of a monopoly of this trade until steamers are numerous enough to glut the home markets. Another important advantage of steamers, we're told, over sailing vessels is the not requiring to wait on the tice of the wind when news arrives that the herrings have struck in at a distant port. The steamer can be on the fishing grounds next day, while a sailing vessel may require, as is often the case, to wait until it is not worth starting. In the Isle of Man Examiner, Saturday, September the 12th, 1908, there's an article entitled Expensive Herrings. After being kept in harbour for well nigh a week by stormy weather, the herring fleet, or rather a portion of it, put to sea from Douglas on Thursday night. The weather was not altogether favourable for fishing, for though fine overhead, there were squalls at times and a considerable sea ran. Poor draughts rewarded the fishermen. The best fished boat was an Irish lugger, which had 16 mees, and a mees, I believe, was a variable quantity of between 500 and 600 herring, while other catches ran as low as 3/4 of 100. By way of compensation, splendid prices were obtained, often the way, as high as 8 shillings and 3pence per 100, which sounds quite a lot actually when you think that was 1908. In 1911, in the same paper, the Isle of Man Examiner, Saturday, September the 23rd, a sad anniversary, the loss of the herring fleet. Yesterday, the paper said, was the anniversary of the loss in 1787 of a considerable portion of the Manx herring fishing fleet off Douglas. On the 21st of September, 124 years ago, that's of 1911 of course, the fleet, which was engaged in what is known as the back fishing from Douglas, put to sea in fair weather. During the night, a storm suddenly arose and raged with such fierceness that the luggers were compelled to run for the harbour. One of the leading boats carried away the primitive harbour light, which in those days consisted of a lantern suspended from an iron standard fixed in the rocks, from which the Victoria Pier now juts. This craft went ashore on the rocks and was followed by many of the others, the loss of the guiding light leading to uncertainty as to course and consequent confusion. Several of them became total wrecks, and the resultant loss of life among the crews was appalling. The disaster plunged the Isle of Man into mourning, and the gloom of it lingered for several years. Indeed, up to quite recently, it was the custom for Manx fishermen to commemorate the occasion by remaining in harbour on the night of the 21st of September and the morning of the following day. Nowadays, time, that great healer, has in so far assuaged grief that the boats proceed to sea as usual on the anniversary of the great disaster. Such was the case on Thursday night, when the section of the fleet taking part in the Douglas back fishing sailed for the fishing grounds as usual. The luggers returned yesterday morning with light catches, the highest being 5 mees. So that's around about 2,500 or so herring, if my maths is correct. In the Isle of Man Times of Saturday, July the 14th, 1951, we were told it was a bad week for the herring fleet. Not as bad as the disaster we were hearing of, though. This has been a bad week for the herring fleet of over 100 boats, now based at Peel. 100 boats since 1950. Might have earned practically nothing since the season opened, and generally speaking, earnings for the crews have been very poor. Tuesday saw 108 arrivals, of which 32 boats made landings of 275 crans. Now, I don't know what a cran is. Shout if you do. Prices from 46 shillings to 61 shillings per cran. This is a cran, not a mees. 450 crans were taken to Port Patrick, selling from 84 shillings to 92 shillings. Wednesday, 105 arrivals when only 5 boats made landings of 26 crans. Prices were 80 shillings to 118 shillings. Nothing went to Port Patrick. Thursday, stormy and only part of the fleet at sea. The total landing was 4 crans from one boat, the others blank. These sold for £10 and 1 shilling per cran. On Friday, the position was still bad, 100 boats landing only 50 crans. In 1958, in the west side of the Times newspaper, Friday, June the 27th, we're told a redundant post, that being the Admiral of the Herring Fleet. Was it necessary, the article starts, to carry the items Admiral and Vice Admiral of the Herring Fleet in the government estimates every year, asked Mr. C.C. McPhee during the budget debate in Tynwald last week. The whole thing is absurd, said Mr. McPhee, who stated that it was making the herring fleet look ridiculous. Our reporter was informed at Government Office that the last Admiral and Vice Admiral were appointed in 1951, and since that time the posts have been vacant. The officers are a relic of the days when the fishing fleet consisted of from 300 to 400 boats. The appointment is made by the Lieutenant Governor on the recommendation of the Fisheries Branch of the Board of Agriculture. There was still a Queen of the Herring Fleet, going strong though, according to the Peel City Guardian of Saturday, July the 13th, 1963. The Queen of the Herring Fleet is to be held, or the Queen of the Herring Fleet Festival, to be more exact, is to be held on Monday, July the 15th. At 2:30 p.m. in the grounds of Peel Castle, Miss Ruth Cowell will be crowned Queen of the Herring Fleet by Lucille Gay, one of the world's greatest skating comedians. The mind boggles, now appearing at the Palace Theatre in Douglas. This will be followed by a pageant by the children of Peel Clothworkers School under the direction of G.W. Sale BSc and staff. To conclude the afternoon's entertainment, there will be novelty sports in the castle, whatever they were. The Queen, accompanied by her retinue, that's the Queen of the Herring Fleet, not the real Queen, will then go for a sail around Peel Bay in the fishing vessel Signora II, skipper L. Horsbergen. Oh, I hope she enjoyed it. Had her oilskins on. And finally, from the Isle of Man Times, Friday, July the 13th, 1956, news from out of town. And the rather startling news, it seems, according to the top of the article: Peel goes gay. Queen of the Herring Fleet Festival. Mrs. Bessie Braddock, MPJP, makes hit. Does that make any sense? I have no idea. The best ever. That was the general opinion of the Queen of the Herring Fleet Festival and Carnival at the Western Port on Monday, when after somewhat mixed weather, what a surprise, at the weekend, conditions were ideal. Woohoo! In the afternoon, the sun was high. The crowd saw the arrival on a small boat of the Queen of the Herring Fleet for 1956, Miss Shirley Farragher of Mona Street, and she looked charming in her white dress and with flowing auburn hair. The crowning took place on the Scottish fishing boat Goodwill, skipper Alex Brown, lying at anchor under the ancient and weather-beaten walls of Peel Castle. Mr. Tom E. Cowell, CTC JP, first welcomed the crowd and the visiting fishermen and hoped they would have a successful season. Skipper Alex Brown, on behalf of the visiting fishermen, presented Mrs. Braddock with a fishing vessel in a bottle, which she said she was always treasure. I wonder if she or the family still have it. And Miss Eileen Tier, the retiring queen, was presented with a ship's wheel with a bell. One likes to think they're still lurking in some living rooms in the west of the island. The herring, been a mainstay of the Isle of Man for goodness knows how many centuries, and perhaps might be again, with our quota increasing or doubling for the next season. Whichever way you look at it, it's in the news now, and it was old news as well. Until next week, look after yourselves. Cheerio. You're gonna be yesterday's news.